Good day, I'm Angel, a founder and CEO at FewTech.io, and today we'll be talking about early stage funding for tech startups in Africa. At FewTech.io, we take the guesswork out of decision making by matching buyers and sellers in an easy way. Our matchmaking methodology is proven and has generated our sellers nearly $1 million of revenue. Our passion is helping companies to find new customers and do business in Africa. And today I have the pleasure of speaking to Wanjiku Kimani, venture builder, VC ecosystem builder, and venture partner at the Baobab Network on early stage funding for tech startups in Africa. The Baobab Network is an accelerator that backs early stage technology startups in Africa, providing entrepreneurs with funding, support, and a global platform to scale their business. Wanjiku is also a founder of Hills and Greens, which is a networking platform for young women that are in the early stages of their career and business. Today, you'll learn about traction and key metrics for funding, challenges for startups, how tech is expected to change Africa in the next few years. Will it hurt it? Will it help it? How startups are found and funded, what startups can do better, and the importance of early stage funding and why it's essential for startups. Wanjiku, such a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Awesome. Now, just to kick us off, maybe you could just tell us a little bit more about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, sure. I'm Wanjiku Kimani. I'm Kenyan. I currently live in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm a venture partner at the Baobab Network. So my role involves identifying amazing founders and startups across the continent, and supporting the startups that come into a portfolio and ensuring that they're set up for growth. So that means just like either in terms of sharing my expertise, which has been in management consulting, a bit of in economics, also in financial services. So I have a background within the financial services sector. And I did a bit of work in the data science field. So that's what I do. And also I'm a founder of a network of young women in early stages of their career in business that are called Hills and Green. Yeah, so that's a bit about me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. I actually looked at Hills and Green. Looks like an awesome initiative in what you're doing and assisting women in starting businesses here in Africa. Now, obviously, you support early stage tech companies in Africa. And I just want to start off by understanding, the key metrics that you guys look for, whether it's when it comes to traction and key metrics. What are those for companies or startups and founders, entrepreneurs that are looking to be funded?
Yeah. So at the Baobab Network, we are pre-seed stage, like very early on. So usually we'd like to be like the first institutional investors. So in terms of metrics, our expectation is that what we want to see is market validation. So and even when I was starting off like trying to see what kind of companies are best, it's very hard to have like a specific number because it depends on the kind of industry you're in and the kind of product that you have. So what we'd want to see, or what's super important, is market validation in the form of depending on the kind of business you're in. Most of the time that's revenue, especially in Africa. If you want to signal that what I'm working on, there are customers who they're willing to part with their money because I'm providing them value. And so the kind of traction here is we want to see that kind of validation, and then we want to see great month-on-month growth on that validation. So if your validation says revenue, we want to see like a really good double-digit month-on-month growth. If it's users, users that are signing up, and that's like your North Star metric, that's we want to see month on month. And if it's like product development, we want to see iteration as fast as possible. So that ability to execute, like the traction is at our stage, we want to see traction that can really like convince us that you have that ability to execute and that you have some market validation.
Awesome, awesome. Now, based on that, when it comes to month-on-month, say growth in terms of the revenue side, what kind of numbers are we looking at that really get you guys sparked up? For businesses that say we are, having month-on-month growth. Is there a certain benchmark that you have?
Again, I hate to be the person who gives like it's like not a very straightforward answer, but it really depends. When I see like when you're asking that, the number that came into mind, like 30% is a good one, like that's like impressive. But of course, it depends. It depends on the kind of business you're. If you're doing like your long sales cycle with like enterprise sales, 30% might be a lot, but like a really high month-on-month growth of 10% might be really good because of the kind of volume that you're bringing in. But yeah, like I'd say for like more the high volume kind of businesses, 30% plus that's impressive for me. Yeah.
Awesome. And I mean, just to dive a lot deeper in terms of companies that say aren't producing revenue yet, and when it comes to traction based on technology, maybe what are the key aspects in terms of that deployment in technology? What do you look at the team? What are other aspects?
Yeah, so the team is very important. So for this kind of product, where we look at product, that would be mostly deep tech. That's where, because those require a very long product cycle. So what we want to see there is a very, very strong technical team for us to understand, a technical team or a team that they have like very, very deep domain expertise. So 10 years plus kind of expertise, have been doing this for a while, or like a PhD student, and the kind of traction I'd want to see there is how data driven are you? So because the idea of having like great month-on-month growth, that's a signal that there's something that like you're noticing, there's something that's going really well with the customers that you have, and you're using that information to double down on the customers. So we'd want to see that on a product level. How are you using the data, whether it's in research or in the research that you're doing or the user test that you're doing, how data driven are you? So that's what we'll be looking for. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome and really, really insightful actually on both sides, pre-revenue as well as once generating revenue, very clear. Now, in terms of what you see out in the marketplace, in the industry, in terms of the sector for startups, what kind of challenges do you see that startups face? I think that's first and foremost what I would like to cover.
Yeah. So there are a couple. So the first one would be like finding product market fit, I think is the biggest one. Especially at early stage, like it's just so difficult to get to that point where, and I think like for me, how I define product market fit is when like you have too much demand, that like the kind of problems you have when you're having product market fit is like, who do I hire to just like keep up with that demand? But before you get there, it's a long road, and it's a very, very you have to be patient, and also sometimes like just letting go of some ideas that like, because I know when you're a founder, you have this idea, you have this thing that you've been working on for a while, and sometimes that's just not like working out. So, and sometimes the product market fit thing is not even about you as a founder of the product you're building, it's a timing thing. So there's also a lot of like luck involved in the startup business. So that's very difficult because like there's little control you have over that. Also, I'd say co-founder relationships, that's been something I've noticed has been, and when it comes to co-founder relationship, often the issue there has been like roles and responsibilities. So a lot of time we see co-founders like it's more about like who's putting in more the normal things that you find in like a team, who's putting in more effort than who, you know. And so that's like people problems. Like people problems are way harder to solve than engineering problems. Yeah, and also like cash is king. That's why I think we play quite a critical role there in terms of like sometimes like the business is going well, everything is set up, but like you just can't deliver because of lack of funds. So that's a really big one, and it's difficult to fundraise, especially for I mean, I know we see so many these days. Every time you open your LinkedIn or your TechCrunch, you're always seeing people raising, but I think that's more like the 10% than everyone in the startup space. So I'd say those are the things I see people really struggle with. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think what you covered is really so true, you know, in terms of team and the other aspects that you spoke about in terms of challenge. Product market fit is a great thing. I mean, what advice would you give in terms of a company, say, that is struggling with product market fit? What's the best approach that they can take to validate that they have a product market fit?
Yeah. I'd say, okay, so founders who are really like strongly opinionated work well because they have a very clear like vision on what they want to build, and that's really helpful. But at the same time, I think that needs to be balanced by listening to your customers. Just engage with your customers as much as possible. Listen to their problems, but don't listen to their solutions. So just like listen to like what problems are they having, what's recurring. And I'm saying don't listen to their solutions because so there are two types of like rabbit holes I see a lot of founders getting into. The one is you listen to your customers, but you're listening to the solutions that they're giving you. So you end up like building like white label products instead of a highly scalable product. So you're building like features for everyone, for every customer that like tells you, oh, if you had this, I would buy what you're selling, right? And we know that most, especially across Africa, people are too polite to say no, that they don't want your product. So that's one. So don't listen to the solution, listen to the problem. And also another big mistake people do is like you build, and you're not speaking to your customers. Yeah, so the product market fit you can only get to product market fit when you're solving such a big pain point enough that affects enough people that they want to give you your money. And the only way to do that is just like reiterate that with feedback, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. I think you summed that up pretty well there. Thank you for that. Now, if you guys are, and especially you focused on early stage tech companies. Obviously, we met when you were in Cape Town. You having different initiatives all over Africa, and how are you expecting tech to really change Africa in the next few years?
Yeah. So another thing, this is my like personal, like this is where I see like Africa being changed. So the one is future of work. Like I see the technology really disrupting the future of work. For the longest time, like Africa has been, for lack of a better word, like behind because of, low income, low infrastructure and all that. But I think because now we're having a lot more distributed teams, we're having a lot more like cross collaboration amongst like within Africa and even globally. I think we are yet to see like a huge shift in the workplace in the sense of highly technically skilled people within the continent, rising income from that. A lot of like job changes from work that has typically been manually done and now it's being done with technology. So because a lot of solutions that we see, especially across Africa, it's actually South Africa and maybe a bit of Egypt that are anomaly in the sense of there's a lot more deep tech, but in a lot of like the African countries, you find a lot of the things it's about digitization. So I see that like being massively changed. And obviously with more increasing income amongst Africans and a shift in how the workplace, I see a lot of what's it called? Empowerment of the youth and people, and that also seeping into what's it called, like policy and all that. So I'd say future of work is the biggest one.
Fantastic. And I think also countries that are really making a big difference in the Africa startup scene is like Nigeria and Kenya. Don't forget about Kenya. Like I speak to founders coming from Kenya and they're doing some awesome stuff. Nigeria is doing some big stuff, especially around fintech and what they're advancing. Because I know, obviously the Africa startup scene, it's nothing compared to Europe, but there is some really awesome stuff. What are some interesting maybe solutions, deep tech or companies or solutions that you've seen that have been really great that you believe that over the next few years they could change the way it works, as you mentioned?
Yeah. So just on the future of work, I think like seeing a lot of startups trying to solve for that problem. So like there's a lot of like labor movement, and it's quite a bit of friction because we still have like information asymmetries in the labor market. So I'm seeing quite a lot of startups trying to solve for that, which is super interesting in different ways, whether it's upskilling, so a lot of ed tech, or like recruitment tech. Obviously there's fintech. I think I'm tired of talking about fintech, but fintech is, although I'm tired of talking about it, I don't think it's overhyped, to be honest. The payment space. So I think of fintech in terms of like 3 layers of like your payment, which is like the base, credit, and then you have your sophisticated wealth investment products, and then risk insurance products. So I think throughout that, there's still so much to be done. Cash is still king. The competition is cash, and we're not yet there. So I think fintech definitely. On the deep tech side, I'm super excited about like health tech, just because we have a shortage of doctors. We have a shortage of healthcare workers. They're overworked. They're burnt out, and that like ability to bring in technology to be a helper to these critical workers, and also to serve the underserved rural areas. So, and obviously you have the circular or green economy. I think that's really big in terms of energy tech, like your solar powered devices, IoT around that. So I found that interesting just because of its massive scale, but also, I mean, it's the only sector where you can invest without really being careful about social and climate, what's it called? Your social and climate consequences of the companies that you're building. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think clean energy, green energy, solar power, that's something that I think as a nation here in South Africa, we are also quite keen on, because I know you in South Africa. I can't remember I don't know if you experience power cuts, but obviously,
Yes.
but I think that's more of a regulation issue that we have to overcome. But that's a big, once the regulations open up, I think that's a big opportunity in the South African market in terms of clean energy, solar power, because I mean, in 2022, we're still experiencing power cuts. Earlier, I got a message coming in telling me I must be aware we might have a power cut. Hopefully, it doesn't cut us off today,
I hope so. I hope so. But at least, you know what I tell South Africans, I'm like, at least you guys have a schedule for power cuts. As our power cuts just come and you're like, oh wow, that caught me by surprise.
I'm gonna have my candles ready. So if my screen cut, it's just a power cut. But but fantastic. I think that's awesome. And the changes in terms of what you predict and expect in terms of tech and the changes is to make in Africa. Do you think these changes will help or hurt the continent?
Net positive. I mean, I'm sure there'll be like, especially when I was talking about the labor market, I'm sure there'll be huge negative, like I wouldn't say consequences, but outcomes there. But also like there'll be quite a lot of people who gain. But I think net is positive. I mean, I know I'm a techno optimist, so I'm a bit biased here, but I think like we're the creators of the technology. So sometimes we have like unintended consequences and all that, but because we're the creators of it, I think we have that, we have that ability to correct costs if needed. But I don't see a world where if it's going to be negative, it's not going to be the technology, it's going to be the people behind the technology. Yeah.
100%. I think I'm also really an optimist as well, especially, in the time and age that we are and what you can really do with technology. I think technology is a great tool that people can wield, and a lot of the times I find that you don't even need to reinvent the wheel. There's so many different solutions, and there's so many workflows and so many possibilities just because of technology. But at the same time, like you say, where the positive and negative are on the same side, depending on the people, depending on the use, depending on the consumption level, there's so many variables to look at. But overall, I think I'm very optimistic, especially around the continent. I think there's so much opportunity in terms of innovation, innovation from the smallest of communities, smallest of townships, because, I think the best solutions come from that environment, because the people know best what is necessary or what's needed from there. Because I know in South Africa, a lot of the time, you get different kinds of startups and businesses, and sometimes the concepts is just a concept for Europe that comes here. It might say solve a small problem, but it doesn't really captivate the whole market, because overall challenges it might be very, very, very different overall. Yeah. So now, obviously, you guys, you look for startups, you look for early stage tech companies across Africa. You travel across Africa to find, these diamonds, these special diamonds. I want to understand how do you find, or how do you look and find for startups, as well as what do you look for when you find them?
Yeah. So I'd say founders know good founders. So I try find good founders who know other good founders. So I think that's what we try to do. And I mean, I guess like everywhere you look in terms of like your networks, personal networks, and you'd always know that entrepreneur. I'm sure even if you think about like your class at some point, there's that entrepreneur, you know, and those people know good people. So I think that's the biggest one. And also other investors actually. The investment community is really great, especially the African investor community is really great when it comes to like sharing great founders that we think are a good fit for each other. In terms of what we look for, so I'd say in terms of like, so we have, I'd say like we have 4 things. Like there's a team, there's the business model. You want a good business model. You want a huge market opportunity. And also business model is you want scalability, as what you're mentioning, like you want something that can scale. You also want, we also want to work with people who we think would be a great fit for our network. So whether there's synergies within our portfolio companies, or we can see synergies with our global network of investors and experts. So I'll double click there on team, just because that's really important. So for team, we'd want to see ability to execute is such a big one. Like so many people can have ideas. You can talk about it. You can like, but what separates the good founders or the great founders from the not so great founders is just that ability to execute. And that means executing well, but also with speed. I find like I have immense respect for people who can, not just even founders, just people who can like really execute and do it with speed. Grit is also a big one. Like founding a business is more, yes, being smart is important, but someone who's more patient, more resilient can tremendously outdo just a smart person, because a lot of like the building of a company is psychological. It's the ups, it's the downs, it's the pushing through. It's like when do you know when to let go and when to push? And most of the time, pushing is the answer, right? So that resilience is something that we really look for. And also domain expertise. So this one is because so the domain expertise in the sense of like what skills do you have, technical, or do you know the market? So sometimes you'd find like being an outsider helps in the sense of like you can see a problem from a different lens. But at most of the time, at least the research says that having like a really good inside view of the market that you're in, or you have you're solving a problem that you personally face. That's like a great team. And also team dynamic. We want to see people who want to have, as I said, building business is very psychological. So you want to have fun when at it. You want to, even if there are ups and downs, so you want to see a really good team dynamic with complementary skills. Yeah. So those are the things I'd say we look for. And of course, traction. Yeah.
Perfect. It's a nice bucket list. I mean, as I was sitting there, and these are awesome things, I was thinking like, I'm sure some of the viewers and listeners, whether entrepreneurs or founders, are like, how do we represent all of this into a pitch deck and make sure that we validate it? And sometimes all you have is 4 minutes to share all of this, that you're the right company. How can companies do that? You know, what, based on that, you know, in the initial engagement, what foot do you put forward? Because I mean, the actual question would be, you know, if you could take us through maybe the phases of funding until you close around, what the first step, how many steps are there? You know, what are the steps that you initially go from the first meeting till your successful portfolio company?
Yeah, so it's a question like, what is the process of getting into the accelerator, or is it more about like how can you present or how can you present this in a better way?
It's more, for companies, say, that haven't been through the journey of securing funding. Maybe you can explain the steps that they would go from the initial introduction to the due diligence, and how many phases to expect. On the first pitch, is someone just going to say, "I'm sold. Here's 50." Here we go.
It really depends. It really depends on who you are. Some angel investors, they can meet you one time and like 5 minutes later you have. It's not unheard of, eh? So it really depends. It really depends on the kind of investor that you're talking to. So if it's like an accelerator, there's like a very clear program. I mean, a very clear process in the sense of you have your deck, you have first call, second call, and then maybe like when you hear the word investment committee, that means it's a bit more serious than it was. And if you don't hear investment committee, it's like kind of like a no. Yeah, so something about like, I don't know how to answer that question because the VC space is so, and sometimes I find that also frustrating because I would love a bit more structure, but it's a very people business. So it's very difficult to say that you're going to have this step and this step and this step. But what I would say to expect is having the initial call or a conversation with your investor. That would be one. And then having a follow-up, and the follow-up would mainly, that's when the due diligence will start. But founders need to be careful because sometimes you might have continuous calls, and that's not a good sign. It just means that you're good enough, but not great enough for them to like make a decision. So, but at the due diligence stage, that's where your things like your data room, so things like having your cap table ready, having your traction file. So I'd say just like a very simple income statement is what a traction file would be. And just like a bit more probing. And then the final stages would be when it gets serious, when they start to care about terms. And then only when you see a term sheet, I'd say is when it's a yes. Otherwise, before that, just consider it a no. So after the term sheet, signing the term sheet, or if you need to negotiate the term sheet, and then you can close the deal after that. But this depends on the different stages of fundraising and who the investor is. So don't take my word for it if you take 6 months of calls. Yeah.
I think that was a great explanation that you gave just now, because I've seen, as I've spoken to a lot of different founders that are either raising or have raised, is that sometimes it's not so easy to understand what stage you're on in terms of the funding. Obviously, I can understand from the VC side, they have so many different applications they're going through. They don't necessarily always give you feedback that, we are 3 steps away, or we're on stage 1. It's there's a lot more information sharing that obviously can happen going forward into the future to make sure that, which give founders a lot more equipment to understand is that, okay, there's an opportunity here, or no, we need to do X and B and Y in order to position ourselves better. Because I know sometimes when you go through that funding process, you don't necessarily get the feedback that as to why you don't get the funding, if you don't get the funding, which will be essential.
Yeah.
And that's something that I hope in the space that comes through. But do you have something to add from that?
No, yeah, that's really interesting that you say that. I totally agree. But what's interesting is, so you have to understand, think about when you're making a decision about your money, how, if someone was to ask you, what's your process of investing in a house or buying a house? Like it's very difficult. And like if you're a real estate agent, would be like, tell me at what level are you ready for it? So I understand that like frustration, and definitely there needs to be a lot more feedback. I think most of the time it's an issue of time, and it's also just really difficult like to tell people no. It's training a very like relationship heavy kind of business where you don't want to burn bridges. But I think like very true. But also I'd say I wouldn't even believe the feedback that PCs give, like unless it's no, honestly, like because VCs, I feel like especially sometimes unless you're hearing the same thing over and over again from like the different investors that so if you're hearing that your market is small and you hear that like 6 times, maybe there's something there. But someone may just be telling you that your market is too small, and maybe they just can't tell why. They just feel off, like they're not, or yeah, because it's you need to trust the people that you, especially this I'm talking about very early stage. I'm not talking about like your later stage where you have a lot of financial models that you can work with, and it's more quantitative, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'd say even as you're looking for feedback, yes, it's great. I always, even when I'm trying to fundraise with my with the founders that I work with, I do try to get as much feedback as possible, but that's just to get a sense of like, are they all saying the same thing, or is it, because sometimes the VCs are wrong, they're often wrong.
I think
um,
it's really, I think it's really interesting you say that, because I remember a coach told me a while back, because I was looking at some feedback I had gotten, say, from VCs, and she was like, my coach, really, really awesome coach. She said to me, like, unless you're getting like 6 or 7 of the same feedback, we're not going to change for every single investor, because at first it takes time, and like secondly, like you say, they don't have that attention to detail like you do, and they could be wrong as well. So if you stop for every single person and you tweak it up, is that you end up losing a lot of time, and that means less time on traction, on actually the work that needs to be done, and speaking. So I really,
yeah, exactly.
so I really get that, that point that you're saying, that is, don't just jump and be willing and changing everything. Actually assess and have a good enough quantity size in terms of feedback before just making changes. And I think that also goes true for the product as well, and that whether it's a tech product or whatever product you might be with, is that you can't please every single customer. Not everyone is your customer. You have to choose who your customers are, and once you have enough data from a good enough size in terms of people that are going to spend money, make those changes. But don't just change for everybody. Otherwise, you have a product that doesn't really fit anyone.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I agree with you there. Now, I wanted to look at, obviously we spoke about what you look for in terms of funding and the kind of the essentials from there. When we look at your portfolio companies, what kind of diversity do you have when it comes to industries as well as regions? What's that diversity there?
Yeah. Yeah. So the diversity there is, so we're sector agnostic and we're country agnostic. So we have 25 startups across 11 countries. So we obviously have, so in terms of, so you asked about like mostly sectors. So we have health tech, we have logistics, fintech, ed tech, agri-tech. So it's pretty diverse. I think it's also like maybe in 8 or 9 sectors. So I'd say like we're generous in a sense when it comes to like our investment strategy. In terms of countries, we definitely have like the big four, the Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria, and Kenya. But we also have smaller markets like your Zimbabwe, we have Senegal. Who am I missing? Yeah, so I think those are the ones we have at the moment. Yeah, so it's very agnostic. I wouldn't, there's no pattern. I think for a while we had a pattern of having our portfolio heavily skewed towards Nigeria just because of, as you're saying, amazing startups coming from there. But we're seeing that changing. We're seeing amazing startups coming from across the continent.
Fantastic. And what's an awesome success story that you found in terms of a startup that you found where you're like, we need to find more startups like this? You know, what's a good, you know, maybe you can just share a bit more how you found them and how they were able to grow throughout.
Yeah. So our success story within our portfolio company has been Alezo. So they're currently finished Series A, almost into Series B. And how it's actually very interesting. So the founder, you know what, when I was telling you, like, ability to execute, great, like this, and it's a solo founder, and solo founders are, it's either like disastrous in the sense of, and not that the founder is disastrous, but like the morale, like it's very difficult to like keep up that morale. So you have to be like an outlier to be like a great solo founder. Or like your so for solo founder it can be like really difficult for them. So I think what was super amazing about Alezo's founder was they just were getting, excuse my French, just getting shit done. And like, it was just so impressive how they got things done so fast. And even like the reply times on email was like, wow. And being a solo founder, you know, that's you have you're everywhere. So yeah, so that's how we found the founder, and I think they just applied. So that's also something like to encourage, like especially for our program, you don't need to like, it's not that, I mean, it's great if you speak to our team members and, you know, we have ask many questions and all that, but like we're trying to democratize this VC space. So you don't need an intro, you don't need anyone to like, just apply. And if you have the numbers, if you have a good team, if you are in a great market you have identified a great market opportunity, that's will definitely identify you. But yeah, so that's our success story. It's been very interesting. It was a very quick success story also, in the sense of like just things started. I guess it was just the right timing, and things just started falling into place when we were able to use our global network of investors to ensure that they're growing and all that. So, yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Really, really great story. And I'm happy for you guys and, you know, for that company too. What did you say the name of the company was?
Alezo.
Alezo. Fantastic. Fantastic. Shout out to Alezo. Fantastic. Now, what can startups do better? You know, whether it's startups in Africa or startups that might be listening that are in other parts of the world, whether Asia or Europe, what can startups do better?
I'd say just being, to be honest, I think startups are doing a good job. Like, I mean, I see so many founders doing amazing things already and doing, like just executing well and being close to their customers. I'm seeing that already. So I don't think that's so here I use the word startups and founders very interchangeably just because of the early stage. Usually the startup and the founder are kind of the same thing. I think what founders could do better is spend a bit more time honing communication as a skill. I'd say it's very important. So communication is super important in terms of like, I won't talk about investors because that's like obvious, but I'll talk about it later. But the one is articulating that mission and vision and ensuring alignment with the team, and even like convincing people to like leave like comfy jobs, in very stable jobs, to come and take the risk and be with you. That communication skill, ability to sell to customers, ability to convince partners or bring in partnerships, and also of course communicate what you're trying to do, because I see so many founders, like they're really good at building, they get things done, but it's just so difficult to get them fundraising because they're just not great at that, like communicating. And you need to establish that trust with the people around you. So if there's one thing, and I also try to continuously work at it, this and it's a continuous thing to learn on, is just like communicating and telling your story really, really well. And also actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the importance of processes. I mean, I think so. Entrepreneurs are. I don't think entrepreneurs start being entrepreneurs so that they can like be told what to do or like do things in a very like rigid way. So I get the shying away, or sometimes it's like about time, maybe you're just very process oriented, but you don't have the time to do it. But I'd say if you especially when you're almost scaling and you're at that point where you're seeing an inflection point, I think it pays so much to just like sit back a bit and just like create some processes. That way you're not dependent on like if someone leaves, you're like, yes, you have that like cost, or it's very difficult for you, but like you're creating a company DNA. And I think that can be done through processes. So you want the company to have its own breath and life. And the only way you can do that is create systems outside of yourself for that to stand. So I think that's I think, yeah, what startups can do better. And it also helps like being a team of people love certainty. So it also helps bring up a bit more, not just certainty, but stability, not certainty, because I don't think you can have certainty in early stage, but a bit of stability for your team. Yeah.
Okay, really, really awesome. And I'm a systems and processes guy, so I can definitely understand what you're speaking about. Ultimately, we're looking to build a turnkey business. Essentially, your goal is that I should be able to just give you the key, and you should be able to still run the vehicle the same way I was able to run it. So I understand systems and processes just makes life easier, and you save so much more time. And making sure that the business doesn't need you as a founder is one of the most essential things, because I feel like a lot of businesses are too reliant on an individual or the founder, and that slows down the business ultimately over time. So yeah, I definitely get that. And now, as an accelerator, as a company that funds early stage companies as well and supports them, what would you say the importance of early stage funding is, and why is it essential for startups?
Yeah. No, man, as I said, one of the biggest reasons why startups fail is cash, like lack of cash flow. And it really hurts, especially when you have the product market fit, but you just can't deliver. I think that's where it hurts most. Or you don't have enough runway to get to product market fit. So I think that's the obvious reason. I think the other, like, not so obvious reason may be, I think there's so many people out there who, because funding is a really great way of de-risking for a founder, right? And I think it's just so important to have like an ecosystem that encourages entrepreneurs, or at least not eliminate the risk, but enables entrepreneurs to take that jump and actually take that risk, that calculated risk, with some funding behind them. and yeah, so I think that's super important because I think we have brilliant minds across Africa, people who can solve great problems. But entrepreneurship is difficult, and it just like when you have that like support ecosystem, it makes a big difference. The other one obviously would be because like I'd say early stage funding is the R&D money for the world, and in this case for Africa. Our governments are not spending enough on R&D. And so I think that's where the VC space is. We need that innovation. We need that like money to experiment, to fail, and to build like amazing solutions for our continent. We need that money to really tackle the things that the infrastructural problems that are not being solved. Like I think that's even why I got into early stage funding. I'm just too impatient to wait for government or inertia institutions to drive that forward. I think there's still a place for them. Not saying that there's no place for that change, but I see early stage funding as a big catalyst there.
Fantastic, awesome. Well, if you've got a great product, if you've got the traction, if you've got the team, if you've got product market fit, then hit up Wanjiku. I'm sure she can assist you in raising anything up to $50,000 in terms of early stage funding, and follow me as well. But Wanjiku, it's been such a pleasure, really insightful speaking to you today, understanding what it takes to be funded, what it takes, for a company to succeed. Because at the end of the day, the company has to be doing well in order to get those support and assistance. It needs to go to the next stage. So for people that say, I've got the traction, I've got the product market fit, I've got the team, how can they find you?
Yeah, so just that we don't require product market fit, by the way. We're not expecting it's product market fit is usually like series seed, series A. So you're closer. We just want to see some traction and that things are moving. Yeah. So sorry, what was the question again? Like what?
How can people find you? How can
people find me? You can find me on LinkedIn, Wanjiku Kimani. You can. I'm not on social media. Sorry, guys. That's the only place you can find me on LinkedIn. I should create a website, but I don't have one. But yeah, LinkedIn I think is where. I also have a Substack, by the way. I'll drop it by you. But it's not VC related. It's just my thoughts about the world and all that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Awesome. I think, join the community, reach out to Wanjiku. Also if you're female in Africa looking for support, join that community as well. So much support for entrepreneurs and businesses. And here we are, shouting out. So this...
And also obviously Baobab Network. The website. Yes.
Yes, and Baobab Network.
The Baobab Network.
100%. And yeah, I think let's try create an ecosystem in Africa. This episode was powered by futech.io, where we take the guesswork out of decision making by matching buyers and sellers in an easy way. Wanjiku, thank you so much once again. Until next time, we'll chat again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.